Let me get straight to the point. My name's Sophia. And in 2023, I died. For 3 full minutes. My heart stopped. I left this world. I saw America fall. Burning like Rome. I saw who caused it and why. And when I came back, I returned with a warning for both the faithful and the unfaithful. I know this is a Christian channel. But believe me, before this experience, I never would have imagined being here. I considered myself spiritual. But not religious, certainly not a Christian. But everything changed after what I saw. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at NDE today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith. What I saw on the other side wasn't just terrifying, it was a warning. A massive clock. Frozen at 11:58. Stars falling from the sky. A voice thundered. The hour has come. Then, a figure of light appeared with a message, the faithful will rise. If you think this world is stable, think again. Time is running out. It all began when my heart stopped. It wasn't dramatic at first. Just a strange buzzing in my ears. The lights flickering. And voices distant. Then everything stopped, no sound. No feeling. Just silence. I wasn't scared. Just confused. 1 second. I was in the ER. And the next. I was floating above my own body. Watching the doctors desperately trying to revive me. I tried to shout. But I couldn't move. Then I felt a gentle pull. Peaceful. Like being carried by an invisible current. The room faded away. And suddenly, everything was gone. That's when the darkness set in. Thick. Alive. Pressing against me. I couldn't see or hear anything. Only the suffocating void. Pulling me deeper. I tried to fight it. But I had no control. It wasn't a dream, it was too real. It wasn't just dark, it was heavy. Pressing down from all sides. I tried to move. But there was nothing to grab onto. No sense of direction. I was suspended in an endless void. Then, out of nowhere, I began to hear faint whispers. At first, they seemed like nothing. Like rustling leaves. But soon they grew louder and more distinct. It wasn't a voice speaking directly to me. But a flood of emotions, grief. Anger. Regret. It was overwhelming. As if every bad feeling I'd ever experienced was now crashing into me. Then, shapes started to appear in the darkness. At first, just faint shadows. But as they grew clearer, I saw faces, dozens. Maybe hundreds. Twisted. Blurry. Broken faces. Like reflections in rippling water. They all carried an unbearable weight of sadness and anger. One face locked eyes with me. And then it spoke, why? Just that one word. It wasn't accusing. But it felt like a punch to the gut. I couldn't answer because I didn't understand the question. More voices joined in. Asking, why didn't you act? Why didn't you see? Their words weren't clear. But their emotions, guilt, sorrow, and anger flooded over me. I felt guilty. Even though I didn't know why. It was like they were pulling out hidden parts of me I didn't even know existed. The faces began swirling together. Merging into a massive shadow. Writhing like it was alive. The whispers turned into screams. Loud and sharp. Echoing around me. I wanted to run. To escape. But there was nowhere to go. I was trapped. Crushed under the weight of it all. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The faces disappeared. The screams faded. Silence descended. More oppressive than the noise. But then, I felt something else. A presence. It was subtle at first, but undeniable. It wasn't like the faces or whispers. It was bigger. Scarier. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it watching me. Massive and unyielding. Like a mountain staring you down. It didn't speak, but I could feel its presence, like it was waiting. Testing me. Then, far in the distance, I saw a tiny pinprick of light. Faint but cutting through the darkness like a single star. I felt an overwhelming urge to move toward it. Not knowing what it was, but knowing I had to. The pull was back. Stronger this time. And I followed without hesitation. As I neared the light, it grew brighter. And the darkness around me rippled like waves in a pond. I began seeing flashes of shapes, colors, and a landscape that didn't make sense. The pull became almost irresistible. And then, just like that, the darkness was gone. I found myself standing in a place I could barely comprehend. I was in a desert, but not any desert I had ever seen. The sand beneath me sparkled like crushed glass, shifting unnaturally underfoot. The air felt thick, heavy, pressing down on me. The sky above wasn't the normal blue or cloudy, no, it was a swirling mix of deep reds, oranges, and purples. Like a cosmic storm. But the air was still. Completely still. In the distance, I saw massive towers. They rose out of the ground like giant spires. But they weren't like anything I'd ever seen. They seemed alive. Their surfaces pulsing and twisting as if they were breathing or growing. Some leaned at strange angles, threatening to collapse. But they didn't. Each tower had a flag on top. But I didn't recognize most of them at first. As I squinted, I realized they were flags of different countries: the Union Jack, the French tricolor, and others I couldn't place. But then I saw the tallest one. The one that stood far above all the rest. At the top was the American flag. But something was wrong with it. It wasn't just hanging there, it was pulsing. Moving. As if it were alive. Seeing it twisted my stomach in a way I couldn't explain. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Like something was terribly wrong. I started walking toward the towers, though it felt more like I was being pulled again. As I got closer, the ground beneath me began to shake. It wasn't like an earthquake, but something deeper. As if the whole desert was groaning under an enormous weight. Then, I heard it, a low, rumbling sound. Almost like thunder. But slower and heavier. That's when I saw it, a crack. Small at first. Right at the base of the American tower. It spread quickly. Zigzagging up like lightning. The rumbling grew louder. And before I knew it, flames shot out from the crack, licking the sides of the tower. The whole structure groaned with a horrible metallic screech. A sound that made me want to cover my ears. Then, suddenly, it disintegrated, not falling or collapsing, but turning to ash. Like it had never been solid to begin with. I stood there, shocked, staring at where the tower had been. I couldn't process what I had just witnessed. But before I could make sense of it, something else began to happen. From the ashes, a massive black obelisk began to rise. It was smooth, shiny, almost like glass. Stretching up so high, it seemed to pierce the swirling sky. Strange symbols appeared on its surface, intricate and glowing, like nothing I'd ever seen before. I couldn't read them, but somehow I understood. They felt ancient, powerful, And wrong like they weren't meant for me or anyone else to understand. The air grew colder. The pressure in my chest increasing as the obelisk seemed to stare right through me. Then, I heard a voice. Deep. Commanding. But not loud. It echoed everywhere. As if the desert itself were speaking, the foundation is gone. The tower will rise. I froze. I didn't understand the meaning of the words. But I felt the weight of them. They weren't just a statement, they were a declaration. Something final and unstoppable. The obelisk pulsed with light. Its symbols growing brighter. And I felt an overwhelming urge to run. But I couldn't. My feet were frozen. And the pull intensified, dragging me closer to the ominous structure. Before I could reach it, the ground beneath me shifted. The desert began to transform, the sand turned dark, almost ashy, and the horizon blurred. In the distance, flickering lights caught my attention, fires burning in what looked like a city. The pull grew stronger, and I knew with certainty that I was being taken to this place next. As I got closer, I realized the lights weren't random. They were fires, dozens of them, scattered across what was left of a city. The desert gave way to cracked streets and crumbling buildings. The remnants of destruction. It looked as if the area had been ravaged by countless explosions. Hollowed-out buildings stood as twisted skeletons, barely intact. Glass crunched underfoot. And the air, thick with smoke and ash, stung my eyes, even though I wasn't sure I was breathing. At first, the city was eerily silent, save for the crackle of flames and the occasional groan of collapsing structures. It was as if the city itself was holding its breath. Then, a scream cut through the stillness, sharp, panicked. It was followed by more, until the chaos exploded into a cacophony of fear and desperation. The sound was deafening, a symphony of hopelessness. The pull dragged me deeper into the heart of the city. That's when I saw them. The figures looked like soldiers. But something was off. Their movements were mechanical. And their faces were smooth black masks, void of features. They methodically rounded up people, separating families. One father tried to fight back, but the figure effortlessly tossed him aside. And he didn't move again. I stood frozen, watching the terror on the people's faces. They had given up hope. The sky darkened. The moon turned blood red, casting eerie shadows over the ruins, making everything feel unnatural. What I thought were stars began falling. But these weren't ordinary stars. These were massive, blazing fireballs hurtling toward the ground. Each one hit with a deafening explosion, sending shockwaves that knocked people over and ripped apart the city. The fires they ignited spread instantly, devouring everything in their path. I could feel the searing heat, even though I wasn't physically there. One star struck a nearby building, and the explosion sent debris flying. The force knocked me to the ground. But there was no pain. Just a hollow sensation, as if the air had been sucked out of my lungs. When I looked up, the building had vanished, leaving behind a smoldering crater. Then I saw it. At first, I mistook it for another falling star. But as it drew closer, I realized it was a massive eagle. Its wings burned and broken. It crashed into the ground with a sickening thud. And for a moment, everything went silent. The fires paused. The screams faded. And the stillness was overwhelming. It felt as though the eagle wasn't just a bird, it was a symbol of something larger. Something fallen. I wanted to look away, to escape. But the pull dragged me forward, deeper into the chaos. I passed a group huddled in what used to be a church. The walls were scorched. The roof caved in. Yet they clung to each other, praying aloud. One of the masked figures approached, holding a torch. Without hesitation, it threw the torch into the group. The flames erupted, and their prayers turned into screams. Frozen, I could only watch as the fire consumed them. The masked figures moving on without a second glance. Above all of this, the obelisk loomed larger, now towering over the city. Its glowing symbols pulsed in sync with the falling stars, drawing me closer. The pull grew stronger, dragging me toward it. And I knew whatever came next wouldn't be any better. The stars continued to fall, one after the other, glowing with unnatural heat. Every impact leveled entire blocks, shaking the ground violently. I felt the tremors in my chest, as though the very earth was about to tear itself apart. Destruction followed wherever they landed. Buildings crumbled like paper. Streets cracked open, forming jagged chasms that seemed endless. The fire spread in a way I couldn't even describe. It wasn't just the flames, it was as if the very air itself had caught fire. The heat was so intense it felt like it was searing my soul. Even though I wasn't physically there, but the stars were more than just light and fire as they streaked through the sky. I could see shapes inside them, faces twisted in agony, contorted and screaming without sound. They weren't human. Not really. Their features were distorted, sharp in places and too soft in others. Like something born from nightmares. The hunger in their eyes was unmistakable. Like they were searching for something specific. Just seeing them made my stomach churn. One of the stars hit a tower nearby. The explosion was so violent it sent debris flying in every direction. I raised my hands instinctively, but the shards of metal and glass passed right through me as if I wasn't there. Still, the force knocked me back, and I fell hard onto the cracked asphalt. I wasn't injured, but I felt an emptiness. Like every moment of destruction was pulling something away from me. I tried to get up, but the ground started to shake again. This time even harder. A deep, guttural roar filled the air, vibrating through my bones. I thought it was from the stars. But then I saw it, a massive crack splitting the earth open. The edges glowed with fiery red light. And from within came a growl, deep and endless. It wasn't just a noise. It felt like an ancient presence, vast and overpowering. And it sent a chill down my spine. Then, the obelisk began to glow brighter. The strange symbols pulsed faster, feeding off the chaos, the destruction. The pull toward it intensified, dragging me closer even as the city continued to collapse around me. I passed another group of people, huddled together, crying, praying, doing everything they could to find some comfort. But it didn't matter. A star fell directly into their path, and the explosion consumed them entirely. When the dust finally settled, there was nothing left, no remnants. Not even ashes. Just a blackened crater and the faint, acrid smell of something burned. I staggered forward, my feet moving of their own accord, as though the pull from the obelisk was forcing each step. Above me, the stars kept falling, but now they seemed deliberate. Each one struck with precision, wiping out the last remains of the city. It wasn't random destruction. The stars were being directed, as if they were guided by some unseen hand. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something different. It wasn't a star. It wasn't a person. It was the eagle, the same one I had seen earlier. But this time, it wasn't falling. It was fighting to stay in the air. Its wings charred and tattered, but it struggled desperately, trying to fly. For a brief moment, I thought it might make it, that it could escape. Then a star struck it. The explosion was blinding, and the eagle vanished in a pillar of fire and smoke. The shockwave knocked me to the ground once again. And for a moment, I couldn't hear or see anything. When the smoke cleared, only embers remained, drifting down like snow. The eagle was gone. The stars seemed to pause, suspended in the sky, glowing faintly. The silence was deafening, as if the world itself was holding its breath. In the distance, I saw it. The obelisk. It glowed brighter now, almost too bright to look at. Its symbols pulsing in time with the tremors beneath my feet, as though it was alive, feeding on the destruction. Then the voice came again, deep and resonant, echoing like thunder across the ruins. The hour has come. The tower will rise. A cold shiver ran through me, even as the heat from the surrounding fires seared my skin. The pull toward the obelisk grew even stronger, drawing me forward like a magnet. I didn't want to go. I knew whatever awaited me there wouldn't be good. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't fight it. The stars were falling again. The fires raged on. And the obelisk called me closer. Deep inside, I knew there was no way to stop it. As I neared the obelisk, the pull grew overwhelming. Not just on my body, but deep within me. The heat from the fires was suffocating, the air thick with smoke. Each star that fell brought another wave of destruction. The city was almost completely gone. All that was left was rubble, ash, and an overwhelming sense of doom. And then, everything stopped. The fires froze, their flames suspended mid-flicker, as if someone had pressed pause on reality. The stars, which had been falling relentlessly, hung motionless in the blood-red sky. Even the horrific screams gone silent. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath. The only sound was the faint hum of the obelisk, its glowing symbols pulsing like a heartbeat. That's when I saw it, the light. At first, it was tiny, barely more than a pinprick in the distance. But it quickly spread, filling the ruins like a sunrise. It wasn't cold or harsh, like the earlier light I had seen. This was warm, golden, alive. It illuminated everything it touched, softening the destruction, making the rubble and ash look almost peaceful. For the first time, a tiny spark of hope flickered inside me. As the light grew brighter, it began to take form. At first, just a vague outline. But soon, it became unmistakable. A figure, tall and wrapped in robes that shimmered like liquid gold. Their face was hidden by the brilliance of the light, but their presence was undeniable. They didn't speak right away, but I could feel them looking at me, as if seeing every part of me, every thought, every fear, every failure. Finally, their voice broke the silence. It wasn't loud, but it resonated deeply, as if it was coming from inside me. "What begins in fire ends in fire," they said. "But from the ashes, the faithful will rise." Their words weren't just sounds, they were truth. I could feel the weight of them pressing into my chest, heavy and unshakable. They weren't just a promise or a warning, they were both. As they spoke, the light grew brighter, spilling out across the ruins, pushing the darkness off. The fires, frozen in time, began to shift. But instead of raging, they transformed, their flames turning golden and swirling in intricate patterns. It was beautiful, so beautiful that it made my heart ache. But the obelisk didn't change. Its dark surface absorbed the light, its symbols pulsing faster, resisting the warmth that now filled the air. I could feel its presence growing stronger, pushing back against the figure of light. The air around me thickened, becoming colder, and the pull toward the obelisk intensified until it felt unbearable. The figure raised their hand, and a golden scepter appeared, shining with the same light that surrounded them. They pointed it toward the obelisk. In that instant, everything went still. The symbols on the obelisk flared to life, glowing so brightly they burned into my vision. The tension in the air was palpable, as if two immense forces were locked in a silent struggle. Then the figure lowered their scepter and turned to face me. Their light dimmed slightly, and their voice took on a note of urgency. "Watch and remember," they said. "What is written will come to pass. The foundation has fallen, but the faithful will endure." Their words resonated in my mind. A warning and a promise both. The pull toward the obelisk returned, stronger than ever. The figure stepped back, their golden light slowly fading, leaving only a faint glimmer on the horizon. The fires reignited. The stars fell again. Chaos came rushing back. A tidal wave of destruction. But I wasn't the same. The figure's presence had planted a seed of hope within me. Small, fragile, but enough to keep me going. The obelisk loomed larger now, its pull dragging me forward. I knew whatever awaited me there would be the final chapter of this nightmare. Every step felt heavier, like the air itself was trying to hold me back. The ground trembled beneath my feet. Tiny cracks spidered out with each quake. The fires raged. The stars continued to fall. The world seemed to be unraveling. The noise explosions, roaring flames. The incessant hum of the obelisk was deafening. Then, without warning, the ground in front of me split wide open. The crack split wide, sending fiery light pouring from its core. At first, I thought it was just another chasm. But then something massive began to rise from it. I froze as a giant clock emerged. It was impossibly huge, its surface faintly glowing and cracked, as though it had been buried for centuries. The clock hovered above the ground, towering over me. Its face was ancient, tarnished, with smudged glass. But the numbers were still visible. The hands of the clock didn't move smoothly. They jerked and twitched, lurching forward before snapping back, as if they couldn't decide where to go. The ticking started slow, uneven, but grew louder, more deliberate, until it felt like the entire world was pulsing in time with it. I couldn't look away. The clock wasn't just a timepiece, it felt alive. As I stared, faint images began to flicker across its surface like shadows trapped inside the glass. Fires, collapsed buildings, people crying, fighting, running, all the chaos I had already seen. But more. It was as though the clock wasn't just showing the present, it was showing everything at once. Then the hands started to move faster, spinning wildly. The ticking turned frantic, like a countdown. My chest tightened, and I wanted to scream. Stop it. Just stop. But I couldn't. The pull toward the obelisk grew stronger as I moved closer to the clock. The images blurred, becoming a swirling mass of fire, destruction, and something else I couldn't make out. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the hands froze. The ticking stopped. An eerie silence fell over everything. The clock's hands were stuck at 11:58. I knew it deep in my bones, time was almost up. Whatever this clock represented, this was it. A single drop of water appeared on the clock's face, trembling as though it were alive. It fell, and when it hit the glass, it made a sharp, crystalline chime. The sound spread outward, crackling like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Fissures began to spider across the clock's surface, glowing faintly with an unnatural golden light. And then the hands shattered. The shards of the clock didn't just fall, they exploded outward, disappearing into the fiery chasm below. The entire clock groaned as if alive, racked with pain. Then the voice returned. The hour has come. The reckoning begins. This time, the voice was colder, harsher. It echoed everywhere through the ground, the air, and even through me. Inside my chest, the obelisk flared to life, its symbols glowing so intensely that I had to shield my eyes. The pull toward it became almost unbearable, as though it was trying to tear me apart. Above me, the sky began to collapse. The stars, which had briefly hung still, started falling again, faster and harder. Each one struck with a deafening explosion, leaving behind craters deep enough to swallow the earth. The fires roared higher. Chasms opened wide, splitting the city into pieces. The destruction felt complete, yet deliberate, as if every explosion and crack was part of a grand design. The voice spoke again, louder this time. The foundation is gone. The tower will rise. I turned toward the obelisk. It was even larger, towering over what little remained of the city. Its symbols pulsed in time with the trembling ground, and I could feel it pulling me closer. The air around it buzzed with an unsettling energy that made my skin crawl. I wanted to run, but there was no escape. The obelisk wasn't just calling me, it was demanding me. Then I saw the clock again, shattered, its hands frozen forever at 11:59. The image burned into my mind, clear and undeniable. This wasn't just a warning, it was a message. Time hadn't run out. It had already run out. The pull grew stronger, and I felt myself being dragged toward the obelisk. Faster now, as if I was being swallowed by it. The fires roared louder. The stars fell relentlessly, and the voice echoed one final time. The faithful will rise. And with that, I was gone. Just like that. It was over. The light from the obelisk grew so bright that it swallowed everything: the fires, the stars, the ruins, even the sound. I was floating in an endless, blinding void, weightless and disconnected. It felt as if every part of me, my thoughts, my fears, my very self was laid bare in that light. I couldn't hide anything. And then, I felt it. A voice. Not cold, but warm, filling every part of me. It didn't speak in words exactly, but I felt it deeply. You are not abandoned. That's when I realized the light wasn't just light. It was love. Pure, overwhelming love, the kind that makes you feel small, yet deeply known. I wanted to stay there forever, to let it take away every pain, every fear. But something pulled me back. Not punishment, but because I wasn't finished yet. The warmth faded, replaced by something colder, heavier. Slowly, I became aware of sound again, a rhythmic beeping, steady and mechanical. The weight in my chest hit me, a burning sensation like my lungs were begging for air. I gasped, and my eyes snapped open. I was back. The ER was chaos. Blinding lights, frantic machines, doctors and nurses moving around in a blur. She's back, someone said. But I could barely process it. My body felt strange, heavy, like I didn't belong in it. I blinked up at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My mind raced. Everything I'd seen, everything I'd felt, it was still clear. Clearer than any dream I'd ever had. And it wasn't fading. In the days that followed, I began to piece it all together: the obelisk, the clock, the falling stars, and the figure of light. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a vision, it was a message. A warning. Not just for me, but for all of us. I spent hours replaying every detail in my mind, trying to make sense of it. The obelisk symbolized darkness, the foundation of something terrible that would rise and spread unless it was stopped. The clock made it clear time wasn't running out. It was gone. But the figure of light, their words kept echoing, what begins in fire ends in fire. But from the ashes, the faithful will rise. At first, I didn't understand. Faithful to what? But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about surviving, it was about standing firm in the truth in His truth. The chaos, the destruction, the despair, it wasn't random. It was the result of a world that had turned away from God. Yet, in the midst of that darkness, there was hope. Not in the world, not in governments, buildings, or towers, but in Him. The vision wasn't just a warning. It was a call to repentance, to faith, to readiness. The figure of light wasn't just a vague presence, it was Him. Christ, the light of the world, standing firm against the rising darkness. His words were clear, there would be fire. There would be destruction. But there would also be redemption for those who remained faithful. When I left the hospital, the world outside felt different, heavier. Like it was teetering on the edge of something huge. I watched people rushing through their lives. Working. Laughing. Fighting, completely unaware of the weight that hung over them. I wanted to scream. To grab them and tell them what I'd seen. What I knew was coming. But I didn't know how. How do you explain something like this without sounding insane? And yet, the more I thought about it, the more I realized the message wasn't about convincing people. It wasn't about making them believe me. It was about pointing them to Him. It was about reminding us that this life is temporary. Everything we build will crumble eventually. The only foundation that lasts is Christ. The clock, frozen at 11:58, burned in my mind. Time was gone. The vision wasn't just about destruction. It was about rising from the ashes. The faithful would rise. Not because of their strength, but because they trusted in Him. Even when the world seemed lost. I don't know why I was chosen or what's coming next. But I know this, the foundation is gone. The hour has passed. The reckoning is near. For those who believe to the truth, there's hope. Always hope. Every night since, I've looked up, half expecting the stars to fall. They haven't. Not yet. But I know it's only a matter of time. When it happens, I'll remember the light, the promise, and the call to stand firm. Because what begins in fire doesn't end in despair, it ends in redemption. In Him. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at NDE today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith.